And out there on the snow, there he was, the mall Santa. I am a mom raising my 8-year-old son in a small suburb. I did well for myself in my landscaping business while my husband worked in tech. The year 2017 was particularly good to us, and so I decided to bring my little boy, Kenneth, to the mall to buy Christmas decors, while my husband stayed at work to finish the last few things he needed to accomplish before his holiday break. Little did we know that this innocent encounter will lead us to a terrifying holiday experience. This story is a cautionary tale. There are evil people out there. The day started normally, with us visiting shops, eating ice cream, and just overall enjoying the holiday vibe of the mall. Of course, like most upper middle class malls, there was a mall Santa. Today, the line was particularly long, extending to the food court. I got really impatient, but Kenny Boy was adamant that we fall in line so he could whisper his gift request to the old man. When it was his turn, he could barely hold his excitement, a big grin all over his face. I moved a few feet away, trying to get good pictures and videos on my phone. The crowd was always on the way of the shots, so I had to move further and further away to the back. I noticed the mall Santa staring at me, smiling the whole time, while my boy was excitedly speaking to him while sitting on his lap. It was not creepy or anything. It didn't raise any red flags because obviously I was the parent and he just wanted to keep me in his sights. What I didn't know was how the conversation with my son was going. I couldn't hear it from where I was, but if I did, I would have stopped it immediately. When my kid was done, I asked him what he and Santa talked about, because they really did take quite a while to finish. He said it was a secret, and that he didn't want Santa to think he was naughty and not give him a gift. Fair enough. I dropped the topic completely, not thinking much about it. That night, I tucked Ken in and kissed him goodnight as usual. He seemed to be alert and energetic to fall asleep. I stood up close to the tiny opening on the window. The snowstorm outside had become stronger. I looked down on him. He told me not to lock it, because Santa will come by tonight. I told him that Santa Claus and his reindeers only come on Christmas Eve. He reluctantly agreed to go to sleep. What I would find out later would haunt me for the rest of my life. I was fast asleep beside my husband when my door slowly creaked open. In the small opening, I could see my son peeping.
"What's up, buddy?"
my husband asked.
"Santa's here, Dad,"
he said.
"That's nice. Go to sleep now or he will not bring you gifts." "But he's asking me to open the door. Should I?"
My husband is too sleepy to engage with this further. He just told our son that if Santa wants to go in, he can use the chimney as usual. What we didn't know was that our son wasn't imagining it. When he was sitting on the mall Santa's lap, Santa asked him what he wanted for Christmas as usual. So he listed down the various console games he wanted. Santa asked him to describe his house. He said it was big. Santa then asked him about our stuff, our TV, our games, our appliances. Then, Santa told him he can visit earlier. All my son needed to do was tell him our address. My son hesitated at first, saying that Santa should know where everyone lived. He simply said,
"I am a forgetful man. If you want it earlier, you can just tell me now, so I can deliver tonight."
That night, when my kid was lying awake in bed, he heard a voice calling him from outside. He peeked at the window, and out there on the snow, there he was, the mall Santa. Behind him were two other guys, but they were obscured by the darkness and the snow. My son opened the window and spoke to them. This is when Santa said he had a gift. and he was asking for him to open the door. Back to our room, my husband just dismissed my son and told him to go to bed. He ran down the stairs. I heard him. I was awoken by the sound of thuds. It sounded like he fell on the way down. I rushed down. He wasn't crying or anything, but he was on the floor. Just as I started going down the stairs, he quickly rose up and ran to the door. I saw from the window the image of 3 men. My son's hand was now on the doorknob. I shouted at him not to open it. He said, "It's Santa." I said it's not. I grabbed my phone and shouted at them to get the hell out of my property and that the cops are coming as well. Then, I hear a loud thud. Then another. They are trying to break the door down. But just as the latch on the door almost broke, I got the keys of my car and turned on the car alarm. This startled the men, thinking that they have activated an alarm system, and then they scrambled off. We didn't really hear anything from them that night. All 3 of us huddled together in the room. Police were alerted and did a sweep of our area and found nothing. The next morning was especially cold. My husband got some wood and placed it on the fireplace. We had some hot cocoa in our hands. My son was still shaken from what he had experienced last night, but he's starting to talk now. As the fire grew hotter, my husband noticed a weird smell coming out from the fireplace, like burning meat. Then, a loud scream. It startled all of us. Then the screaming continued. Then, the unmistakable sound of a man choking. It was disturbing. My husband immediately killed the fire. He then called the cops. What we found would haunt my dreams for years to come. Sometime in the night, the man in the Santa costume decided he didn't want to give up. He climbed the chimney as many robbers do, to try to fit in and get into our fireplace. Like the chimney sweepers of the past and many robbers of the present day, he got stuck in the fireplace and was actually already suffering from positional asphyxia. And when my husband turned on the fire, the heat grew immensely, and his face and right side started burning into a crisp. He died from carbon inhalation. The smell was unbearable. The sight of his burnt body in a Santa costume is forever in my memory. 13 years ago, when I was 10, my family's life changed forever. What was going to be a nice winter getaway became a complete and utter nightmare that I don't think I will ever get over. I must confess that I have lived in relative privilege. My mom and dad were both heirs to well-off families, and so, my life was pretty comfortable. 8 years ago, when I was 10, we went off to Europe for our Christmas vacation. A winter wonderland is what my mom promised. An unforgettable holiday experience. She turned out to be right. It was unforgettable, but not in a good way. It became lifelong trauma for all of us. We arrived at the lavish ski resort and planned out our day. There were activities designed for the whole family to enjoy. Basic skiing, sledding, even a wonderful sleigh ride. Then there were activities specifically for adults. More advanced skiing, climbing to the peak of the frozen mountain, and other more challenging stuff. My parents would leave us in a private daycare whenever they did the more adult stuff. It was 2 days before Christmas when our nightmare finally happened. Mom and Dad went up the mountain that morning. They had guides, of course, and were part of a small group. They reached the top of the mountain after 3 hours of hiking. There, they were so high up that they could practically touch the clouds. They began their descent early afternoon and finished around 4. This is when my dad asked if he could still use the chairlift to ski. The guide strongly discouraged it, saying that the temperature was starting to drop really quickly and the wind is starting to get strong. Besides, they might not even be open anymore, as they close fairly early in preparation for the Christmas event that night. Mom and Dad, being rather insistent, broke away from the group. They got to the chairlift area and saw that there was nobody left in the queue of people planning to go up. They were the last ones there, and the prior group was way ahead of them. They saw the guy operating inside the small makeshift clubhouse. They waved at him. The glass was foggy. He waved back at them, and they assumed that this meant they could ride. This was their biggest mistake. They boarded the lift and slowly ascended up into the now barely visible slope. The thick snow covering the land, and the wind carrying the small crystals, making it hard to see. Empty chair after empty chair passed them on their way up. Mom was starting to think that maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all. But all of a sudden, they see another couple, an older one on their way down. They also look cold. The two couples exchanged short glances and wry smiles. This gave my mom a bit of assurance. At least they weren't totally alone. The ski chair finally reached the summit and turned around. Then, it started its slow descent. They took on the view of the resort, and it looked great at night. Then, the chair stopped. Just out of nowhere, it stopped. Dad assured Mom that this happens all the time. It's no big deal. It will restart. She was assured for a while. Then, they see the guy operating it go out of the operating cabin. From where they are, he looked like an ant. They call out to him, wave their hands in the air, in sheer desperation, begging, shouting,
"We're here! We've been left behind!"
For a while it looked like he was going to stop. They thought he heard them. They were wrong. He was just lighting up a cigarette. Then he walked away. They screamed even louder, pleading. Then he slowly disappeared into the snowy haze. And there was nothing but darkness, silence, and the 20 or more feet drop under their feet. Dad stared at it. He knew a fall from this height could be injurious or deadly. He took it off his mind. Surely someone will realize that they are gone, right? The kids are in their daycare. They have fallen asleep from a day of playing. No one will realize they are missing anytime soon. Mom's teeth were chattering. She could feel the chill reach her bones. Dad said something to her, but the words didn't come out properly. He was slurring. He felt weak and leaned his face against the metal corner of the chair. Then he fell asleep. An hour later he woke up. His wife was gripping his hand, while huddled closely to him. She looked at her fingers and they were swollen. He tried to move, but felt an excruciating pain on the side of his face. He tried to move, only to realize that some of the tissue has experienced ice burn from the exposure to the metal surface. "We are going to die here if we don't do anything," my dad said. So they thought of what they could do. Dad first thought about using the wire to climb down. He stood up, rocking the chair dangerously. It was swinging back and forth. But when he tried to grip the metal wire, he found that his hands are unable to grip properly, probably because of the effect of the cold. He tried anyway, and as he gripped, the metal wire tore into his gloves, creating a large gash on his hand. He howled in pain and watched as a huge wound on his hand bled and the droplets hit the snow ground below. They huddled together and tried to keep warm. Dad finally said, "I need to jump. If I don't, we will die." She didn't want him to, but he insisted. He braced himself, thinking if he should keep his skis on, but then decided otherwise because he thought it might be dangerous if he lands the wrong way. Meanwhile, in the resort, we woke up searching for our parents. We frantically asked around. No one has seen them. The hiking guide has now helped us in asking people if they had seen them. Finally, someone spoke up. It was the couple they met on the ski lift. They said they found it odd that two people were still going up at that hour. Immediately, sirens started sounding all around the resort as they all rushed to the lift. Dad braced himself. He decided to hang from the lift as it would lower the impact just a little. He was now dangling, holding on. He tells my mom, "I love you. And if anything happens, tell the kids I love them." And just as he is about to let go, the lights turn on the lift, and it starts moving again. The operator in the cabin, sweaty, tense, and working as fast as he can to get them down. The problem was my dad's grip was slipping. He could no longer hold on, and there was still over 20 feet of drop. Mom took a risk and tried to pull him up as the lift slowly descends. She tried with all her might, but then her hand gripped his, and the deep wound from earlier. Dad screamed in pain and instinctively recoiled his bleeding hand, and he fell. The drop was long, and as he fell, his leg shattered, the bones now protruding from where his knee used to be. He was gravely injured and barely conscious. He looked up, and his fall sent the chair in a chaotic wobble. Mom was now in danger of falling too. She was holding on to the metal rail for dear life, not even caring that the metal was probably causing deep frostbites in her hand. Blood pooled around my dad as he was slowly losing consciousness, his vision becoming blurry. All he saw was the snow above him. Surprisingly beautiful. Not a bad sight to die to, he thought. But then, he saw some of the rescue crew as he slipped into unconsciousness. By some stroke of luck, Dad survived, yet his lower body is now permanently paralyzed. It did significant damage to his spine, but at least he lived. He and Mom said that they would have gone through any pain just to survive, because they were thinking of us. It was the thought of never seeing their kids again that kept them fighting. I am now married and I have a baby girl, and my parents' words never left me. They fought so hard to still be here for their kids, and now we are going to celebrate their first Christmas holiday with mine, and this time we're just going to stay at home. This happened on Thanksgiving in 2002. My name is Heidi, and my twin brother is Zach. We were both 12 years old when this all went down. What happened never really left me, and I was scarred for life. My grandfather was in his mid-60s then, and had just lost his wife 6 years prior. They were together for over 3 decades, and he was devastated. His mental health at that point has declined so much, and he was starting to get forgetful. We didn't see him for a good 3 years, but he had been living alone in his cozy little cabin in the backwoods of Idaho. It was a beautiful, scenic place to retire. My parents were working for the same company, in the business of supplying products on the market in South America. They had to travel for 2 weeks in November to lock a couple of business deals. Sadly, they couldn't really bring us with them because of recent financial problems. And now, as an adult, I suspect that they just wanted their second honeymoon. At first, they considered a babysitter, but then my brother suggested we stay with Grandpa instead. He has taken an interest in hunting and knew that my grandfather was an avid hunter. My parents were delighted. They always kept in touch with my granddad, but haven't really visited him in ages. And so, they brought us the 4-hour drive to Idaho, and we ended up passing through some beautiful river trails, up some dirt path, into a nice cabin that I remember from my childhood. Grandpa was waiting for us, his eyes beaming from excitement, seeing his grandkids again. Then, my parents went out to chat with him while we stood near the river, taking in the lovely view around us. This was a welcome break from the city life we have been accustomed to. My parents said their goodbyes, and we were left with an excited old man who was more than happy to have us there. Things were normal at first. No real indication that there was a terrifying ordeal coming our way. We had a wonderful dinner on Thanksgiving Day. The turkey was divine. Grandpa regaled us with stories about his childhood. They were fun. But in the middle of telling us a story about my mom, he stopped and said she was dead, and broke down. I told him, "Grandpa, Mom is alive. She was just here." The smile disappeared from his eyes. He took his carving knife and used it to stab the table, rage in his eyes, and shouted at me, "Don't you dare lie to me!" I was horrified. Then he seemed to snap out of it. He apologized. He seemed genuinely upset. He laughed and realized that it was his wife who was dead, and not his daughter. My brother and I were really shook up about this, but we brushed it off. Of course, there will be memory slips. We do have a genetic predisposition for dementia, and the more we think about it, it was more sad than scary. We went into the bedroom. It stunk, literally. There was a really putrid smell of decay in the room. I just covered my nose and hoped that I would get used to this. Grandpa went inside and tucked us into bed, telling us a bedtime story. Oddly enough, it was about movies he saw in the 60s. It was kinda adorable, and we dozed off. I awoke under the light of the moon, to the sound of grunting. There was this creepy low grunt coming from where the door was. In the door, illuminated by the light of the moon, I can see Grandpa's eyes staring angrily at us. He is grinding his teeth. The scary sound of teeth grinding I can still remember. It was really frightening. In his hand, he's holding his hunting rifle. I didn't know what to do. I just called his name. He blinked quickly, like snapping out of a daze, and said that he thought he had heard something. And then he wished me good night. I could barely sleep that night, the putrid smell not helping. In the morning, both my brother and I woke up, groggy and tired. We both talked about the putrid smell and began investigating. He said it seems to be coming from under the bed. So we went under the beds to investigate. There were weird scratch marks on the floor. We saw a shoebox at the far end of the underside of the bed. I crawled in and got it. Oh God, the smell was unbearable. Then I looked at my hand and there was blood in it. What was I holding? Why is it leaking blood? Then I pulled it out and slowly opened it. Inside was the decaying corpses of various mammals. A squirrel, mice, and even a raccoon. Most of them are badly mutilated. Some were even decapitated. It was horrific. My brother and I sat down on the bed, dumbfounded. We felt that something was terribly off here. He said that we needed to call our parents immediately, though we know that they are in another country. At that point, most social media sites we have now were non-existent, and so I agreed and said we should send an email right away. The next day, Grandpa bought my brother hunting. Though officially hunting season has ended, Grandpa assured us that there was some game that we can find even as the winter season beckons. And so, they set off. Midway through the hunt, my brother was freezing, and he suggested that they go home instead. Grandpa went off him angrily, telling him to be a man and suck it up. He then walked ahead, following the river trail, but then he heard a gunshot. The tree bark, just beside his head, exploded as a bullet hit it, just a few inches from his face. He looked up, and Grandpa was angrily looking at him.
"Get out of my property!"
he shouted. My brother was terrified. He then heard another shot. He ducked for cover and ran away.
"You can run, but you can't hide, trespassers!"
He was screaming. He rushed to the house, screaming at me. I didn't really understand what he was saying at first, but he said we had to go. While he was saying this, plates behind me exploded as bullets hit them, wounding me on the face with the broken glass. We ran into the house. My brother was holding up his hunting rifle. I was trying to grab whatever weapon I could find and ended up with a long fireplace poker. We hear the door to the house swing open. We run to the bedroom. But then, as we are about to enter, we hear the cocking of the gun.
"Stop right there!"
he shouted. We turned around. He was there behind us, gun pointed directly at us. We were trapped.
Grandpa, it's us.
"Who the hell are you?"
he asked. My brother answered.
We're your grandkids.
He said he had no grandkids. His daughter is still in high school. We said our mom's name. He looked visibly confused and unnerved. He put his finger on the trigger of the gun. We kept talking.
We had Thanksgiving dinner, remember? You told us stories about your favorite movies, remember?
We recounted our conversations over the past few days. There is a long tense moment of silence, and he moves the gun towards my brother.
"Why are you crying?"
He asked my brother.
Because you don't remember us,
he answered. There was a short moment of realization on his end. He then put the gun down, slowly. He looked mortified and realized what he had almost done. He broke down crying and was looking at my face, all bloody. He apologized profusely and said he doesn't have control anymore. We stayed in his friend's house for the rest of the night, broken-hearted when he was taken into custody. It didn't turn out badly in the end. We moved him to a great facility near our city where we could visit him more often. I couldn't really blame him for his emotional and mental decline. It was age and the illness, but I do blame myself that we weren't always there for him, and that he barely had great memories with us. At least now, we were closer and could spend more time with him in a safer environment. He passed away with our entire family on his bedside 3 years later.